I'd like to, today I'd like to focus on the process that I use to help students write these incredible essays that I've been sharing with you. Um, and to just speak about how I work with students and how I get them how I help them to write these essays. As many of you know, I mean, I'm in the business of helping students get into the college or colleges of their dreams, and the essay is a very it's the golden key. It's a very important factor in the application process. I think it's going to be even more important than it's been because SATs and ACTs, many schools are going test optional. As many of you know, the University of California has just decided to go test optional, so students can decide, yes, to submit their scores or not to. Many of the students who wanted to take the test in March and in June, the test dates were canceled. So my understanding is you can now register for tests in the fall. But a lot of students are going to opt out, and it's changing the landscape of college admissions pretty radically. I think it's a wonderful shift, and I hope it moves in that direction. But what that's doing is it's taking away one of the main criteria uh, that is used in deciding whether to accept or reject a student at any given college. I think it's a really false metric, but there you have it. And so it's going to end up putting more weight on the college essays. I think that's wonderful because the college essays are a more accurate, heartfelt, deeper expression of of who a student is than the SAT scores, um, which you take it one time or two times in 3 hours, and it's they're standardized tests, and they really don't reveal much, and they have problems in terms of being not being equitable as well. So the college essays, though, are the student's opportunity to really meet. It's the opportunity for the admissions to meet the student and for the student to present themselves to admissions in as fully a way as they can. I mean, you can revise an essay indefinitely until the deadline, so you can start way in advance, which is a good idea. And then you can revise it until you're happy with it, and then you press send. So it's a really beautiful way to for admissions to tell a lot about a student, and it's a great way for a student to present themselves to admissions. It's really important. But writing is difficult. It's difficult for everybody, and usually comes with a lot of anxiety. So I developed a method over the years to take the anxiety out of the equation and to bring in a kind of spontaneity, so that the process is much more free form and doesn't isn't as anxiety producing as writing tends to be. And the mainstay of my process is the free write. So, I mean, most writing teachers, even enlightened writing teachers, often think you have to have a topic first. And while you do need a topic in a way, on the other hand, I often tell students to write first and think later. It kind of sometimes doesn't matter even what the topic you may think your topic is, and you end up on writing about something else. So I think the more flexibility you have around what the topic is, not pounding into the student, you must have a topic. What's your topic going to be? It's got to be an interesting topic, is to just get them to find moments in their lives that come to them, like this was an important moment. I remember that. I always come back to that moment. This is the moment that comes to me when I think about A, B, and C. And just to write on those moments and then let what emerges tell you, read what you've written to figure out what you're trying to say, basically. I remember reading a book by Richard Hugo called The Triggering Town kind of early in my career. He was a great poet and he wrote about writing. And his idea was sort of write first, think later, that you might have an idea that you want to write about the rain. But then when you start writing about the rain, the mind is a wild animal. You end up writing about something entirely different. And he encourages students to just keep going with whatever you were writing about, and that the thing that originally started you writing, he calls the triggering subject. The book is called The Triggering Town by Richard Hugo. It's beautiful. And here's a little passage from the book that I love to quote. It's quoted in my book, The Art of the College Essay. Your triggering subjects are those that ignite your need for words. When you are honest to your feelings, that triggering town chooses you, just as the wand chooses the wizard in Harry Potter. That triggering town chooses you. Your words used your way will generate meanings. Your obsessions lead you to your vocabulary. Your way of writing locates, even creates, your inner life. The relation of you to your language gains power. The relation of you to the triggering subject weakens. There's another beautiful quote on the next page by William Saroyan, who wrote, oh my gosh, it's eluding me for a moment here, of human bondage, I believe. Starting with a tree and finally getting to the death of a brother. Starting with a tree and finally getting to the death of a brother. How do you write? My answer is that I start with the trees and keep right on straight ahead. I start with these companions of place, each fixed into the soil of where it is, and sometimes the rock or rocks, and very little else. And after that, the going is not only easy, it is very near rollicking. A writer writes, and if he begins by remembering a tree in the backyard, that is solely to permit him gradually to reach the piano in the parlor upon which rests the photograph of the kid brother killed in the war. So in that sense, I mean, you can just start anywhere, trust yourself, keep writing, and see where the writing takes you, because that's where you need to go. It's not necessarily where you thought you wanted to go or you needed to go. It's where the writing takes you. So in the essay that I'm going to read today, it's an essay by a student called Remy Ferrou. He was he ended up getting accepted into and going to the University of Texas at Austin. I encouraged him to come up with moments, and he came up with two very significant moments in his life. One in which which was transformative for him, in which he was bitten by a pit bull and lost it was a very, very severe bite. The dog wouldn't let go, and he lost nerves. He had nerve damage, and that arm didn't develop fully, and so forth. He was 10 when it happened. It was kind of a defining moment in his life. Not kind of, it was a defining moment in his life. And then the other one is that a little bit later, 5 years or so after this happened, he tried out for pole vaulting and ended up becoming a successful pole vaulter. So he wrote these two things, and he wanted to write an essay on both of them, on pole vaulting, and we tried it, and on being bit by the pit bull, and we tried it. And in the end, both of them ended up to be too thin in some way. They were like one-trick ponies. They just weren't full enough to make up an essay. As I think I've mentioned before, Grace Paley, whom I studied with, used to say there's always a story and a story underneath the story. So there's the pit bull story, and there's the pole vaulting story, and what's the story underneath those stories? So we worked hard, Remy and I worked really hard in trying to figure out how to make each of those essays work. And then one day he said to me, maybe they go together. And I didn't see it at first. I said, well, how would that be? And he said, well, actually, I won't tell you. I'll read it, and then you can see how they go together. But that's what ended up happening. Now, you wouldn't think that these two things would go together, but when you hear them, I think it will make sense to you why and how he put them together. The only thing else I want to say is that often when I'm working with a student, there's the level on which the sort of practical level on which we're writing that particular essay and what it needs to make it work. And then there's a meta level, which is the level helping the student understand sort of techniques of writing, or what do you do when you come to a moment like that, or how would you create that, or how do you get the reader to understand that in a general way when you have that kind of moment. There's a kind of meta level. And often I use Bob Ross as an example. You know, Bob Ross is, I think he died recently, this year or last year. He's the guy who has, you know, an empty canvas, and he creates these beautiful landscapes, and he's teaching people to do it while he's doing it. And he's very, very soft spoken, and he speaks like this. He says, "Okay, I think we need, don't you think we need some clouds over here? Why don't we, yeah, let's put some clouds. Let's put some clouds. I think a very light blue with a little bit of white would work." And he's teaching technique as he's doing this. It's also extremely calming. He's got this lull in his voice as he's teaching and painting, because he's painting at the same time. And he says, "Okay, let's cut up these sponges." And he cuts up these sponges, and he takes it, and he says, "Let's put this little sponge in the white paint, shall we? And then let's take the sponge and let's put it right here on the painting. We'll just dab it like this. Just dab it." It's very interesting because the lull in his voice is a sort of remedy for the anxiety of a blank canvas. He lulls the listener into releasing their anxiety and just painting. And at the same time, it's always a meta level, because he's saying, if you have little sponges, this works really well when you want to make clouds. And you dip it into the white, then you dip it into the blue, and then you just dab it lightly. Let's just dab it lightly on the canvas. So with Remy, I did this Bob Ross moment, and I said, well, okay, so you're explaining about pole vaulting, but the reader doesn't really know what you're trying to say, and it's just going too fast. Like, we don't know. I don't know anything about pole. Now I do, but I didn't before I had helped him. And so it was a Bob Ross moment where I said to him, let's slow that down. See if you can, and in a kind of lulling voice, get him to slow down the moment of pole vaulting. And it's really beautiful in this essay that I want to read you. It's one of the highlights, I think, of the whole essay, is when that Bob Ross moment of sort of dabbing the clouds onto that blank canvas and slowing that moment down. So anyway, that was a very long preamble, but I did want to speak about process a little bit, because I'm always reading the product and commenting, offering commentary on the product without that much time spent or energy spent on the process. And the process, of course, is what it's really all about. And if you mix those up and you think that the product is the process, that creates a lot of anxiety for the student. I have an idea, great, write an essay. But that's not process. That's having an idea and wanting the product to appear. Process has to do with, you know, you start with the piano, and you start with whatever he said. What did he say? You start with the trees, and you go through the backyard, and that leads you through the back door to the photograph, to the piano, on which there is a photograph of the kid brother who was killed in the war. So you may not have set out to write about that brother, but if you follow the circuitous path of the mind and let it do what it does, you'll end up with what you need to write about. Enough said. I'm going to read the essay. To be a pole vaulter, and it appears in this book. Whoops, where did I put it? Unstuck. To be a pole vaulter, you have to have three very important qualities. Got that? Yes. You have to be smart. I know from your mom that you are. You have to be handsome. You're fine there. And you have to be fast. We'll see about the fast part, won't we? I started practice a month later. Remy, look how skinny you are. What do you weigh, 80 pounds? You need to put some meat on those bones. I know what you need. You need gym and protein. What about friends? You have to make friends with the pole. And so I began my career in pole vaulting. Remy, I've told you this for 3 years straight, and every time you make the same mistake, my coach Roger admonished, I just want you to get upside down. My life had already been turned upside down just a few years earlier. And that's the connection. I was visiting my grandmother, tie-dyeing shirts in the garage with friends, when Jeremy's girlfriend says, "It's okay, you can pet him, he doesn't bite." Taking her encouragement, I reached out to pet Face, a cute pit bull who was sitting on his haunches, idly observing me. The next thing I remember is writhing on the ground, his maw clamped around my left forearm. From here on, I recall the events in a mix of first and third person. After I was in Face's grasp, I recall him dragging me through the side yard and into the garage. From my grandparents' house, I was rushed to the hospital. To put it mildly, the 30-minute wait was the second most painful experience in my life, the first being when the doctor had to administer a numbing agent into each laceration in my arm via a hypodermic needle. Once the pain medication was administered, I immediately passed out and woke up in the hospital the following morning. Directly after the incident, I lost all dexterity and experienced serious nerve damage in my left arm below the elbow. I could barely touch my fingers to my thumb and could not move my wrist at all. A touch to my arm, depending on the location, would either be completely imperceptible or cause excruciating needles of pain to course through my arm. It took 1 year before I could fully extend my fingers to high-five friends, another before I could make a fist, and a third before my strength fully returned. Once I had the strength to get myself aloft, the thought of letting go of control terrified me. I know, I said to Roger. All I have to do is jump backwards, flip upside down, and try not to fall straight onto my face. I hear some friends behind me yell out, "Run like the wind." I laugh in my head and focus. I set my hands onto the pole. I set my feet to the right position. I set my mind to the task. I blast forward, not counting my steps. I rely on pure muscle memory, trusting my legs, arms, and body to do what they're supposed to do. Butt to the sky! Point your butt to the sky! And to my surprise, I do. My legs continue, and this is the part, the Bob Ross moment. My legs continue to rise over my head, my arms pulling my body vertical alongside my pole, like a leaf caught in the warm updraft of a summer breeze. And as I extend, I glide effortlessly over the bar and free fall to the mat. I set the bar high for myself and have built the strength and tenacity it takes to keep surmounting whatever challenges life throws my way. Having undergone such physical trauma, I have gained empathy for those experiencing debilitating injuries. While I cannot know the extent of any person's struggle, I can readily and do empathize with their struggle, sharing whatever encouragement I can. I didn't even realize it before I spoke and before I read it, that the idea of letting go of control and I rely on pure muscle memory, trusting my legs, arms, and body to do what they're supposed to do. And that all I have to do is jump backwards, flip upside down, and try not to fall straight onto my face. Um, that letting go of control turns out to be so important to this essay, which was the point of what I was trying to say about writing, that you want to trick yourself into a moment where you just allow yourself to go where your mind wants to go. And from there, you can figure out what you're trying to say. So that was accidental, actually, that I didn't think about it that way. I was really more focused on how he put the two stories together of the pit bull and the pole vaulting. I had forgotten that the moment of turning upside down was one of letting go of control and trusting just what his body would do on its own. So that was kind of an accident. And just to say, I'm just jumping on here. I feel so much better, and it probably shows. And I'm just jumping on here when I have a good hair day and my hair's getting really long, and when I have the energy. And today was one of those days. So I'll see you next time. It's great to do these things.